So my hunch is that when you think of Revelation, you probably make the same uh, noise as I have put here. Ah, right. Revelation is strange, and no doubt you have seen or heard or read or thought or said that it's all about kind of how the end of the world's going to come, and we got to look for all the signs and symbols and these sorts of things, and that is just overwhelming and difficult. And I recognize that that is sort of the prevailing wisdom, the prevailing wisdom. But I'm going to invite you as you read Revelation and as I give this presentation, which is going to be a little longer than normal. I'm sorry. Um, to try to keep an open mind. Um, Revelation, I'll just say, is really difficult to read. It's up there with the most difficult, if not the most difficult. So I'd just say, like, be okay with not understanding all of it and not being able to add two and two to make four. It's okay. Our job is not to understand every little bit, but it's to engage with it faithfully. And I think God blesses that. So, a couple ways in which we could read Revelation. One is like a predictive crystal ball, where we're expected to interpret all of the symbols and be able to make connections and say, oh, well, this symbol of the dragon, it's talking about this politician, and the beast is talking about this person or whatever. We could read it historically that these are coded allegories from the first century about their political realities that just don't have really anything to do with us. I'm going to suggest that both of those are incorrect ways of reading and instead propose this. I really like this. This is a bit of a mouthful, but we can break it up. So, Richard Hayes said that Revelation is a theopoetic, visionary unmasking of realistic politics. What? That's a mouthful. So, let's break that down. Theo, meaning having to do with God, theology, right? Theo, having to do with God. Poetic, so poetry is language that evokes imagination, right? Through symbolism and rhythm and meter and these sorts of things. Visionary, forward thinking, not necessarily predictive, but forward thinking. Unmasking, seeing what's really behind the curtain. Realistic, um, not actually what's actually in front of us, not just what's presented. And politics, not necessarily Democrats and Republicans, but politics as the way we live together. Um, the Greek word comes from polis, metropolis, right? People living together. Polis. So having to do with God, language having to do with God that evokes imagination, a forward thinking, unmasking, seeing what's really behind the curtain. And what's really behind the curtain is the actual stuff, not just what's always presented. The actual stuff about how people live together. That's what Revelation is, and I really like that. And take some time to pause in the video and maybe think about that for a second, because I know it's kind of a mouthful and it's a lot, but once you kind of start to wrap your mind around this for me is really helpful, a helpful way of making sense of Revelation. So, so continuing this, then the theopoetic visionary I'm asking of realistic politics. Um, Disclosing, this is what it does. It discloses the truth of human experiences in an evil world, which often has evil people in charge. That's what Revelation does. It discloses the truth of human experience in an evil world, which often has evil people in charge. It offers this sort of elaborate symbolic vision for the church as this kind of alternative political order pitted in conflict with the powers that be. So the powers that be say, we're in charge. This is the way things are. Whereas God says for the church, no, I'm in charge. God says I'm in charge, and you ought to live in this way. And there's conflict there. And Revelation then ends in this theopoetic visionary unmasking of realistic politics. It ends that saying that God wins. God has won. God is winning. and that the powers that be think that they're in charge, but they're not. So, the context a little bit, like what is this? So, Revelation is a pastoral letter from a guy named John of Patmos. We really don't know a lot about John of Patmos other than what is said in Revelation itself. He was apparently a Christian leader, and he was writing to seven of his churches. He was exiled to a small island, Patmos, for his Christian preaching. He was exiled for that. And he's writing to he's on this little island. About 60 miles off the coast of modern day Turkey, and he's writing this pastoral letter to these seven churches that are on the mainland. So this was likely written during the rule of the tyrant Emperor Domitian, about 95-ish AD. So we're thinking a few generations after Jesus. Remember, Jesus's life on earth ended at about 30 to 35. So we're looking at 60 or so years after Jesus. Um, he is writing to these churches who are suffering distress and harassment as this marginalized community of outsiders. Remember, the powers that be are here, and the Christians are beginning to realize in most cases that their commitments are different, and the powers that be don't always take that well. So some of them expect to be arrested. Apparently, one was already martyred, and John himself was exiled. And so we see this persecution um, beginning here. So let's oops, sorry. Let's let's talk about apocalypse for a second. So the word apocalypse comes from the Greek word apocalypsis, which translated to English um, just means unveiling. Unveiling. Apocalypse means unveiling. So typically, when we think of the word apocalypse, we think end of the world, right? But that's not what the actual Greek word that we're using here in the New Testament does not mean end of the world. It means unveiling. So a bride is apocalypsed when her veil is taken down. So it's apocalypsing, unveiling is seeing what's already there, unmasked, no spin, just the plain old truth of how things are. So for Revelation, again, the powers of this world, evil and death themselves, seem to have a foothold. But the truth is, and the truth will be revealed, Revelation says that God has already won. And so the charge is to remain faithful um, even in adversity. So then we talk about symbolism. So there's a lot of symbolism in Revelation. And it's kind of difficult to navigate to wade through this. So apocalyptic literature was this really common genre in the first century in this time and place, and it comes across as sort of strange and grotesque to us, um, probably because we're just not familiar with it. So the people in the first century hearing this, reading this, they would have received this, I think, as a sort of normal. That was common, a common kind of literature, and so it's only strange and grotesque to us because we're unfamiliar with it, I think. So when it comes to the symbolism, I'm going to invite you to take it seriously, but not literally. Um, don't try to say, "Oh, the mark of the beast." Well, what is the mark of the beast? Don't spend all your time trying to sift through the symbolism, but keep the bigger picture in mind. Revelation is a little bit like a political cartoon, or it has some of those elements. So if we saw a political cartoon about elephants and donkeys struggling for power, we kind of get that, right? That's Republicans and Democrats struggling for power. We don't like go into the minutia and say, "Well, oh my gosh, that elephant has a trunk, and that donkey it has hooves. What do the hooves represent?" That's we don't do that, right? And you shouldn't do that. It's the bigger picture. It's people on opposite sides of the aisle jostling for power. So that's kind of the way I'm going to invite you to read Revelation a little bit. So the most important part of Revelation comes at the end. Um, the end is this vision that these people who are undergoing persecution, and that it's not state sponsored persecution quite yet. It's sort of leading there, and John of Patmos has this not prediction, but sort of foresight to note that this is getting worse and it's going to continue getting worse. Um, so I need to write this to encourage them to remain faithful. So, but the most important part comes at the end, and this is this image of a renewed creation, where there's no more crying, no more pain, no more death. We see in Revelation 21. The image he shares is not that we will be removed from this world, not that this world is evil and we sort of curl up in a ball and wait for Jesus to come back, but rather that the world as it is now will be transformed because creation is good. God created it, it must be good. And so it's simply transformed. The transformation of all of the cosmos, the transformation of human experience and all that we are, and all that we will be. Um, it's not when this life is over, I'll fly away, but it's I'm being made new. And victory ultimately is won by the slaughtered lamb, by Jesus, not by the powerful lion. And so this sort of uh, throws throws it all into a throws it all up, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Wayne Meeks famously said, "The moral strategy of the apocalypse is to destroy common sense as a guide for life." The moral strategy of the apocalypse is to destroy common sense as a guide for life. So it's not that, well, if we just stick to the politicians of the day, we'll be fine, right? It's no, uh, for them, particularly reading this, I'm going to remain faithful to Jesus, even if I'm killed for it. And the truth is that most of us watching this and reading Revelation together, we're not going to be really ever faced with martyrdom. And yet we have competing loyalties, right? We all have competing loyalties, and Revelation is written in part to a church in Laodicea. That's one of the seven churches that, and John says you are lukewarm. You think that uh, your commitments to Jesus and your commitments to everything else, yeah, basically the same. He says they're not. That the commitment to Jesus, well, Jesus himself ultimately went to the cross, and it might require the same of us. Um, but it's in the hopes that we are being made new, and that the pain and hurt of this life is not the end. That's why the slaughtered lamb wins, not the powerful lion, and throws common sense out the window. So this is the last book of the New Testament, the last book of the Bible, and I really encourage you to read carefully, but don't dive so deep into the minutia that you miss the bigger picture. And it's been wonderful reading the Bible with you this year, and read this one well. It's an important one.